The Russian Revolution was not a sudden event, but the result of a year's growing social, economic, and political tensions that pushed the country to the very edge. Russia, in the early 20th century, was a deeply unequal society, where the most of the population lived in big poverty, while a small elite controlled wealth and power under the autocratic rule of the Tsar Nicholas II. Social and economic tensions were among the main causes. The majority of Russians were peasants, and even though serfdom had been officially abolished in 1861, their living conditions did not improve much. Many peasants received too little land to survive, and those who did hadn't to pay high redemption fees to the government. The communal land system, which divided poverty among villages, prevented individuals advancing economically and kept them tied to subsistence farming. The situation created widespread frustration and a constant demand for land and freedom. Meanwhile, this industrialization brought new problems in many cities, like St. Petersburg and Moscow. The growing urban class lived and worked in terrible conditions. Factories were overcrowded, the workday was long, wages were low, and safety were almost non-existent. These workers began to organize strikes and protests to demand better treatment, which gave rise to a new sense of class awareness and solidarity. At the same time, the middle class and the intelligentsia, educated people such as teachers, writers, and professionals, that grew increasingly dissatisfied with the lack of political participation. Russia remained an absolute monarchy where the Tsars had almost unlimited power, many power. There were no real democratic institutions, and political opposition was heavily censored or punished. The intelligentsia played a key important role in the developing of revolutionary ideas and spreading them among workers and students, inspiring people to imagine a different future for the country.
These the key events on the stage. February Revolution. The February Revolution started in 1915 with to stop the participation of Russia in the First World War and to stop the loss of the soldiers and stop the out of food that happened that time. Then we have the March Revolution. The March Revolution began in 1917 to the demon government of Cezanne that was leading the country to the Rhine. Civilians began to the wall streets and soldiers had ordered to shoot the protest, but they refused and joined. And after this, Cezanne was obligated to leave the throne, and years later, Cezanne and his family was executed. The October Revolution. In October Revolution 1917, Vladimir Lenin's Bolshevik Party died the Patrol Soviet over the Russian provided government. They even embodied the Bolshevik words as taking the key instruments, and Petrov comments in the statement of the Winter Palace on October 20th OS. This was like a party that they have. That is what I investigate, and it was like a party. The abdication Tsar Nicholas II. Tsar Nicholas II abdicated the Russian throne on March 15, 1917, ending the 30 years old Roman dynasty. To the February Revolution, publics understand the strike, and minuscule soldiers in the Petrograd led the army's height. Command and Duma members to pursued him to step down. He advocated for himself, and he is soon in the favor of his brother. The rise of Lenin and the Balboskis. The rise of Lenin and the Balboskis was the followed by the splits from the Russian Socialist Democracy Labor in the Party of 93. Lenin's return to Russia in 1917 and the population unburned during the World War One. Lenin's leadership was the circular deployment and planned science powered by the first going control of the Petrograd Soviet and the using the power based on the overgrowth and provisional government in the October Revolution of 1917. After taking power, the Balbosky promised to peace. The Balboskis promised peace in the time of the revolutions. That was all. I hope you like it. This part of my investigations. This was not perfect, but I hope I like it. Thank you, and we're going to continue with the next part of our project. Thank you.
Hello, today I am going to talk about the different ideologies in Russia. The difference between Bolsheviks and Mensheviks. The Bolsheviks were way more radical. They wanted a small group of people to make change, and they wanted them to risk everything to make a very quick change. This was the group that finally won. For example, Vladimir Lenin was from this group and they won. Then there were the Mensheviks that they also wanted change, but they wanted it to be more progressive and they wanted a bigger group of people to make the change and in a way less radical way, so it was easier and less risky. Then we got the Bolsheviks and their goals. The Bolsheviks, as I explained before, they were a political party that wanted to end the very old Tsarist rule, to get better rights and overall better living conditions, to make the people with less resources gain power and make a more equal country. Now I'm gonna explain the three different ideologies and what was their influence in their revolutions. First, we got Marxism. This was the political and economic idea of Karl Marx that later led to communism and inspired people to overthrow capitalism. It led to communism because it started developing and it developed to communism, which I'm gonna talk about a bit later. Then we got socialism. This is the ideology that says that the people, everyone, the community, is the people that control the government. It was the main ideology during the Russian Revolution, and it was the one that they wanted to put in Russia. Then we got communism, that is an ideology that says that everything is from everyone. It provided the Bolsheviks their main ideology, so it was Bolsheviks believed in communism, that, as I explained, is that everything is from everyone. For example, the land is from every single people. Even though you don't have the resources to be the owner of the land, it is technically yours.
Hello, my name is Emilio Jarrin. Today I'm going to talk about the boundaries and geographic context of the Russian Revolution. Okay? After the February Revolution, Nicholas II made a provisional government that failed to keep the control in Russia. Later, Lenin and the Bolsheviks led in the October Revolution, taking Petrograd and created the Soviet government. This caused civil war and independence movements and the creation of the Soviet Union. The Russian Revolution took place across a huge and diverse Russian Empire, which stretched over the eastern of Europe and North Asia. All this caused a social unrest, and especially during the First World War, when many large empires began to collapse, and people was not happy with the menace that have the Soviet Union, and because the First World War, Soviet Union centralized control and reduced spaces of the war of their empire. and changing the regions and the geographical shape. Okay? Geographic features show plains, rivers, and forest influence where people lived, trade, and fought strategies, basically. While shared north climates and costly water exacerbate food storage that helped Russian Revolution. Okay, Russia vast graphy with mountains, plants, and tundras, a lot that cover all Russia, basically all that Russia covered by mountains, rivers, tundras, and its military strategies once a territorial expansion. After the in 1917 revolution, the Bolsheviks sought to spread communism, causing conflicts in neighbor nations. Russia, the Soviet Union expanded its borders, wars, and politics. After Poland, Hungary, and the Baltic states, Russia's security policy focused on creating border zones to prevent invasions. Also, when the USSR dissolved the Soviet Union in 1991, many new independent states embarked by training and political tensions remained. Okay, thank you very much. That was all. In this moment, I'm going to show you an image of the map of Russia, and that's all. Thank you very much, teacher. See you. Bye.
The Russian Civil War was a hard and violent fight between two sides called the Red and the Whites. It changed Russia in many ways. The Reds, also known as the Bolsheviks, wanted to take power, and the Whites were against them, and they tried to keep the old system. This war caused many deaths and destroyed many cities and farms. People went through hunger and disease. The country was left weak and in poverty, and life became very difficult. In the end, the Bolsheviks won the war and took full control of Russia, and they created a new communist government that began to rebuild the nation. Their victory changed Russia and gave the Soviet Union total power. After the war finished in 1922, Russia joined with nearby countries and formed the Soviet Union. The Communist Party became the only group in charge and in control almost everything in the country. Also, the Soviet Union grew stronger and more powerful, so it inspired other countries to follow communism. This this country was one of the most powerful nations in history, and it left a huge mark in the cultural historical values that this country has. In my opinion, these events were one of the most important events in history. Ah no, and it was one of the most important events in Russia history. Bye.
Hello, I'll be talking about cultural and propaganda during the Russian Revolution and about the international reconnections to the Russian Revolution. Culture and propaganda during the Russian Revolution. The Bolsheviks regime. After the 1917 revolution, they used propaganda and culture to consolidate its power. Since a large part of the population was illiterate, they used visual posters, slogans like peace, land, and bread, and also they used agitprop, trends to educate the masses. Although they initially supported avant-garde art, they later promote socialism realism to create new Soviet identity. International reactions to the Russian Revolution. The Russian Revolution caused a strong global reaction in Western capitalist countries like the US and Britain. feared communism, leading to the first Red Scare and interventions against the Bolsheviks in the Russian Civil War. Meanwhile, socialism and anti-colonial movement worldwide were inspired, seeing it as a proof that workers could overthrow old regime. The revolution depended the ideological conflict between the communism and capitalism, later becoming the basis of the Cold War. The rise of the Soviet Union changed international and relations and influenced many revolutionary and authoritarian movements for decades. Thank you.